Well, hello and welcome to Intentional Photography. If you saw my last session, you'll expect this to be a continuation, and that's exactly what it is. If you haven't seen my last session where I began a discussion of macro photography two ways, then I'll put a link right here and you'll be able to follow that. Go back and watch that episode, otherwise you're going to be a bit lost when it comes to watching this one. But I've done a couple things different, and you can probably hear my friend Tom, who's come to visit again as usual. A couple things. One thing, I forced myself, no, I didn't force myself, but I had to go back and work on that Lily of the Valley again. So I'll be putting some shots in there that are actually worth looking at, I promise. But I definitely learned from that mistake, I promise. And that's part of what this is about. Looking at our photography, and I'm going to show you things, as I said before, that probably shouldn't see the light of day. But I also want to show you the difference between a macro lens and that screw-on macro filter. Sometimes they were called close-up filters, but everything I've seen lately is calling them macro filters. And so they'll let you do extremely close-up work, and that's what we're comparing. And so go back and look at last session, and you'll know what's going on today. And so from there, we'll just get right to it and look at the post-production work. Well, I made a promise I didn't keep. I said in the intro I would give you some Lily pictures worth seeing. I pretty much failed at that again. I must not like photography from the prone position. At least I got some good information. This picture was taken with the Nikon with the macro lens at 220 millimeters. I used the camera's autofocus, but now I wish I hadn't. Still, the first full blossom at the top of the frame is in pretty sharp focus. Obviously, this lens has a tiny depth of field. Also, when you were looking at the collage, did you notice how much warmer the white tones are in this photo? I promise that is not due to post-processing. This is a Pentax image with the lens at 18 millimeters with the 10 plus screw-on filter. This was manual focus, aimed at the second blossom on the right side up from the bottom. The bokeh is not as strong as in the previous image, and you can just make out my white car in the background. This is a bonus image. If you saw my first tutorial on macro, I'll put a link. I used an ancient Tamron 35-70 macro zoom. For this shot, I added the 10 plus to the macro at 35 millimeters for this effect. In manual focus, I was aiming at the top blossom, but I would have liked it a bit sharper. What a mixed bag. Let's jump right into the worst first. This image is from the Pentax at 18 millimeters with the 10x, and this proves it. I really don't like shooting in the prone position. But didn't I get an excellent picture of that leaf stem? I was right when I said my video was better. This was taken with a Nikon with the macro lens at 185 millimeters. Seems this lens-camera combination tends toward overexposure in aperture priority mode. Parts of the mushroom seem almost blown out, but look carefully and see the detail in the moss and the mushroom. This image is from the Pentax with the lens at 18 millimeters and the +10 filter. This combination gives a more shallow depth of field, but also more detail in the items that are in focus. This image again, the Pentax at 18 millimeters. I'll call this leftovers, the remnants of a meal. By the way, when I looked the day later, even these were gone. But notice the detail in the moss and the mushroom gills, and then the focus just falls right off. I've definitely saved the best for last. I've used a variety of focal lengths with the Pentax, which introduce some distortion. I'm going to show you how to use that to your advantage. There were so many good shots in this batch it was hard to decide where to start, and I'm probably showing you too many images. So in no particular order, here's a selection. I suppose this is a bonus image as well. This was the Nikon, but with my 18-270 at 32 millimeters using the 10X. Notice how only the very point of this rosebud is in focus. Again, the Nikon with the 18-270 and the 10X, this time at 20 millimeters. Obviously the rosebuds are the intended subject, but I really like how the surrounding blossoms are in soft focus. Still the Nikon with the 10X, this time at 21 millimeters. Here I'm focusing on open blossoms. Again, the same Nikon setup, but at 55 millimeters. When using the 10X, as you increase the focal length, you increase distortion. Notice from front to back how the image not only blurs, but it also is just a bit distorted. Actually, at this level, I find the effect aesthetically pleasing. Now the Nikon macro at 300 millimeters. Is it my imagination, or is that macro lens much brighter than any of the other three I've used today? This time the Pentax at 18 millimeters with the 10X. Notice there is a bit more contrast from this camera, but the rosebud is in sharp focus. Same settings, different subject. I guess I just really like wild roses. Just two more to demonstrate the distortion I mentioned earlier. This is the Pentax at 200 millimeters. Only a bit of the image is really in sharp focus. The rest is blurred or distorted. And one more at 200 millimeters. What do you think? Is the distortion too much, or do you like the effect? Leave me a comment down below. So what do you think? Did you go back and watch the other session? And then what do you think? The two combined. Is it worth it to have the macro lens, or does that screw-on filter do good enough? Granted, there was some distortion with parts of it, but you can use that distortion to good effect. So what do you think? Please leave me a comment. I really love to hear from you. Do we need to buy a macro lens, or can we use a macro filter? So if you liked my session, then please give it a thumbs up. If you're interested in what I'm doing, then please subscribe. But always, thank you for watching.